So
Oh my.
I know. So Hebrews chapter 2, verses 2 and 3. These are the verses that we've already read, and we've started about going through these because there's a lot of in-depth, and then we'll kind of go back and grab some other stuff. But for if the message spoken through angels was legally binding, and every transgression and disobedience received a just punishment, how will we escape if we neglect such a great salvation? This salvation had its beginning when it was spoken of by the Lord, and it was confirmed to us by those who heard him. And we've been kind of dealing with this all along. And I do believe we talked about a sin of commission, and we were talking in here that we understand that we're under grace, right? So we understand that we're there. And so what happened was, in the Old Testament, he talks about how the angels would mediate the law. But now we're under grace. And so as such, we talked about it last week because we asked you the question, what does transgression mean? And that meant what?
Cross the line, trespass.
Transgression means I stepped over the line. Okay? Because God has told us already that here is the sin. And here's the line. And the good, and we talked about it last week. The good thing about it is God doesn't move the line. Okay? He says, here's the line, this is the sin, this is the line. If you step over that line, you have sinned. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. He says, I'm not debating. I'm not changing the meaning of it just because you don't like the meaning of it. He's really, if I can use this, he's really not asking for your input.
Not your opinion or anything else.
He's just flat out saying this is the way it is. And the other thing that he says is if you've broken one of them, you've broken all of them. And so as we were talking about that, so when we come back and we begin to talk about that, let's go back and grab verse 1, because there's some things in verse 1 that helps us to understand the sins of commission. Okay? In Hebrews chapter 2 and verse 1, okay? Where he says, for this reason, we must pay attention all the more to what we have heard so that we will not drift. And this is why sometimes you'll find people that are missing church. And what ends up happening?
The more Sundays they miss, they quit.
Yeah. The more Sundays they miss, they start drifting.
The things they do.
And he's given it, he says, for this reason we must pay attention all the more to what we have heard so that we will not drift away. This is what I keep trying to warn people. It is important to listen to what is said out of the Word of God. A lot of people, all they want, as he said, especially as we get into the latter days, that all people want is tickle my ear. Say something that it doesn't hurt my feelings.
Make me feel good.
That I can feel good about what I've done here today. And because if you're convicting me, I ain't coming back.
It amazes me, some of these evangelists that call themselves evangelists that are on TV, that's all they do, and they get paid millions of dollars, and people follow them.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Who was it that recently said that they're not going to do this prosperity ministry stuff anymore? I want to say I thought it was Benny Hinn.
still around?
Huh?
I said, is he still around?
Yeah, he's still around.
Well, I thought he'd been gone.
No. He just left Florida for Texas because Florida wanted his money. And he had all this, he had a fleet of Mercedes because every one of his kids was on staff. His family was all on staff, and they had each one of them had a mansion, a yacht, and a Mercedes. And it was and they were all business expenses. And so they ended up pulling up stakes and going to Texas because the IRS was coming after them, and so they kind of went their other way. But the word drift means to slip. Okay? It means to slip away. So when you go to fall or slip, how much control do you have of that?
You don't.
You're at the mercy of whatever you're slipping on. You know, like if you're on ice and you slip on an ice, you know, you're going to go as far as that ice, and the momentum will take you. The same way with drifting as a Christian. What ends up happening is, remember it's like we're in a boat with Christ, and He's the rudder that is taking us places. We talk about wind in our sails and all of this other stuff. If you're ever in a sailboat and the masts don't work, you're going somewhere. And most of the time you have no clue where. Or if you're in a motorboat and the motor conks out, you're going to go wherever those waves take you. That's the same way when you're not remembering whatever it is that you have learned. You begin to start drifting with wherever the momentum will take you. Society, laws of the land, and things like that. Because you'll find that society, the rules of society are most of the time today are in a direct conflict with God's law or His scripture. It's not the same. And it's like if you don't understand what it is that you've been taught and you don't retain it, you begin to drift. You begin to slip. Go to John 7 and verse 38.
The one who believes in me, as the scripture has said, we will have streams of living water flow from deep within him.
Okay. So he's talking about believe on me as the scripture has said, okay, that he's out of his heart shall flow rivers of living water. Actually, what they're talking about is really means it's flowing like a river. And what does a river do? It starts and it keeps going, okay? And so when he starts talking about that a river flowing, it's contrary to kind of like drifting, okay? The flowing is going to put you somewhere, okay? And what the writer is saying, it's like here, the Christian is stationary, and the river is moving. They're going, or it's flowing, or kind of passing by. And so what we need to understand is when they start talking about this, that we will not drift away, the things that we heard, what they're trying to tell us out of here, if you take it in context with John chapter 7 and verse number 38, what he's saying to us is that if you understand your salvation, and we talked about how great it is, what salvation does is it keeps you from drifting. So you're right in the mainstream of God and flowing. And out of there, you're moving. You're going with Him. Understanding where He's trying to take you. Okay? And you're moving with that. As I've shared, and I'll continue to share. There is one verse that I said has changed my life. I'll never forget it, and I'll continue to always remember it. Just one little simple verse. In 1993, when I went through experiencing God, one verse, and Jesus said this, I look to see where the Father is working, and I go to join Him. So what I find is God is stationary, and I'm going to join Him as He's moving. I'm not looking to see what it is I have to do. I look to see what it is He's doing. Now, as we were talking in Sunday school this morning, part of what we need to understand is there are times that God tells us to stay still. That doesn't mean we don't do anything. I hear somebody say, okay, what are you doing? I'm waiting on God. Okay, well, how long you been there? It's 3 years. And I still haven't gotten any direction from Him. There are times when God brings you to this point, even in your salvation, where He's at, and He's getting you at a stationary point, because what He's trying to do is helping you to understand that I am still with you. I'm still leading you, guiding you, and directing you, but right now I need to work on something. So I need you here in this spot, because we're getting ready to move. And whenever the rivers start flowing out, you're moving. And sometimes we have no clue where God's taking us. We don't know. We just know, if I can use the analogy, we're just going with the flow. It is very hard to move upstream against God. It's very hard to move upstream against anything. You're doing a lot of struggling and a lot of fighting against that current. That's why I say when God is here, this is what he needs to understand. And what they're talking about here is to pay attention to the things, and again, bringing on down into these verses, is this. Where out of here it says, as the scripture said, out of his heart shall flow rivers of living water. And here's what happens sometimes. If you get out of the current, what do you, and let's say there's something floating in the river. What happens if you're sitting on the bank and you're watching the stuff float in the river?
It comes straight to the surface.
Oh, okay, it'll come to the surface, and then what'll happen with it?
It goes on down the river.
It goes on down the river.
It passes you by.
Yeah.
Okay? And this is what the writer's trying to say. When we neglect such a great salvation, what we don't understand is this. Out of God is flowing stuff. And if we're not careful, we'll miss it. And it'll float right on by us. And we become an observer instead of a participant of what it is and where it is that God's trying to move us. And that's a hard lesson to learn sometimes. And the sad part about it is, sometimes we don't even realize what we're missing. I can use this analogy when last year Diana and I, we took a riverboat cruise. instead of an ocean liner. An ocean liner, a lot of times when you get on these cruise ships and they're out in the ocean, you may not see anything for days. Okay, so you don't know what you're passing by. All you see is water. You know, we saw a sea lion that just happened to come up to the surface and go back down and flipped over and stuff. But if we hadn't been out on the deck, we would have never seen it.
Did you see any whales?
No, because generally the whales are going north. They'll be going north or up towards Alaska. They generally travel there in May, and then they start coming back in October and stuff back towards Hawaii and Mexico and stuff. And so they would be starting to come back out of the north and coming making their trek back south. But on a riverboat cruise, you're a ship, and that thing, the current of the river, you're going with it, and it's just taking you down through there. And as it's taking you down through there, you're looking, and you're always seeing something on the side. You're seeing somebody's house, a car, some kids out there playing, a farmer, doing farming, or you're passing by a city and you get to see the streets and the people passing by, or the people know that there's a ship coming and they'll be standing out on the banks and they'll be waving at you and stuff. And so as you are passing and you're going along with that, you're seeing all of these things. But what happens is if we just are standing on the banks, all of that's just passing us by. And we don't get to see all of the things that are there, okay? And so when it starts talking about drifting, it's almost like back in the Greek language, it's almost like a ring slipping off the finger. Is the proper meaning of the word. It's like I'm losing something. It's going away from me in what we're seeing. Okay? So we have a real problem if we neglect what he says as we were back down in verses 2 and 3. If we neglect such a great salvation, we have an issue that we really need to really take heed with. Because if we start taking our salvation lightly, what will happen is we just kind of drift along. My sons and I were, when they were little, they were not 18 yet, and so we were at a family reunion down at Gatlinburg, and you can go river rafting on these inner tubes. They're like big old truck tire inner tubes. But they have a seat in the middle of them that you can sit on and everything, and basically it is there.
Don't ride them through shallow water.
No, because that hurts, and you also get stuck
You
on the
do.
rocks.
Okay.
You know.
Been there, done that.
But the problem is, when you get on those rafts, you're at the mercy of the current. If there is very little current, you got to start paddling. You know, and everybody's better be paddling in the same direction. Otherwise, you're going in circles. And yet you get kids that are teenagers, they love going in circles, you know, instead of going on down through there. But then there's also warning signs that says, hey, past this point, it is like they grade them on a scale from like 1 to 5 or something, I think it is. And a 5 is pretty heavy. You don't want to be on those currents in that raft, because what's going to happen is you're going to end up getting hurt. And that's the same thing that God is trying to tell us. If you stay with me, I'll take you where you need to go at the right flow, and quit drifting away from me and from the salvation that you have. And not only is there a problem with this, in the saying to don't neglect such a great salvation, that says we have some responsibility here. Too many times what people want to say is, okay, this is a great salvation. This is all God's responsibility. No, it isn't. His responsibility, He gave it to us. Our responsibility is to help feed it. Okay? It needs that food. Food of where we get from praying to God. Food that we get from worship. A personal worship or a corporate worship. And this is, this is where I've been trying to tell you. There are so many people today that we started talking about televangelists. There are so many people today that is their church. To sit at home, turn on the TV, drink my cup of coffee, stay in my Walmart clothes to go shopping.
Hey, there ain't nothing wrong with Walmart.
No, there isn't.
But if you dress in pajamas to go to Walmart,
Walmart.
it's a problem.
That's what I'm talking about. There is a when you got your clothes that are your night clothes, you don't need to be seen in Walmart in your night clothes. Okay?
In the middle of the day.
Okay. But you or 2:00 in the morning, don't go shopping at Walmart. If you ever get upset by what people look like in some of their clothes, don't go to Walmart at 2:00 in the morning.
What are you doing at Walmart at 2 o'clock?
That's the best time to shop.
It's not crowded, there's nobody there.
Well, it's not crowded.
You can get through the line.
Airing rollers and everything.
It's not crowded, but most of the time, understand, that's when they're stocking everything.
Yeah.
And so most of the time, that's when you actually get something that's fresh and that you're looking for.
Right.
You know? But you also get some weirdos. Okay?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, okay, let's just leave that alone.
Anyway, let's leave that. Or wait, this is what I do one then.
But we've got to be careful. And this is some of the things that they're saying here. When he says, be careful that we don't neglect our salvation. That puts some responsibility on us. I hear people all the time saying, well, you know what? I didn't get a thing out of the message today. I didn't learn anything. It was a waste of my time. I don't need to go to church anymore. I already know everything. They're not. There's anything that I don't know, and so I just don't need to go. And what they're doing is they're neglecting their salvation. Okay? Because what happens at the moment in time that you get saved is you've got a little bit of faith. Now, that faith is the grain of a mustard seed. And what can a grain of mustard seed grow into?
Big old tree.
It's huge. Birds, it talks about birds nesting in them. And we ain't talking about one or two little hummingbirds. You see these big old sparrows? The sparrows are like little brown things. But you got those black things. They're not crows.
There's blackbirds. Is what they're
Yeah. But are they ravens?
No, they're just a black.
Just a blackbird? You ever watch those suckers fly and the sparrows fly in the air? I mean, it's fascinating. It's like, okay, guys, we're all going this way. And then all of a sudden somebody says, I'm fooling you, we're going this way. It's like, who's leading this? It's like whoever wants to take the lead, go ahead, you do this. But you just see the pattern that they're flying all over the place. And then they'll all go in line and line up on a telephone line or a utility line or something. And they're there. You could take that whole flock and you could put that all in like a mustard tree. It could.
I didn't know there was a mustard tree.
Huh?
I didn't know there was a mustard tree.
Yeah. The seed will actually grow up into a mustard tree. Yeah.
Talking huge and okay.
Huh?
18 feet.
Yeah.
It spreads out.
It's real big.
What does it produce? Seeds?
Mustard. It actually produces mayonnaise.
Miracle Whip?
No, not Miracle Whip.
Mayonnaise.
Mayonnaise.
That's why we're sitting here.
I don't like Miracle Whip. It's mayonnaise. Elmer's
I
dad.
didn't know if it had like
Little seeds on it.
things you could pull, like a cherry or a walnut or something.
No, it says here it is. It's mustard seed is used as a spice. Okay, grinding it and mixing the seeds with water, vinegar, and other liquids creates a yellow condiment known as prepared mustard. And they're really small. But yet those little things you plant them and they'll grow 20, 30 feet tall
That's it. Wow.
from that just one little
They
seed.
go out.
Yeah, they branch
That's
out.
amazing.
They almost call it like a bush, because it will fan out so large and stuff.
Says mustard seeds generally take 8 to 10 days to germinate if placed under proper conditions with cold atmosphere and relatively moist soil. Mature mustard plants grow into shrubs.
That's a big shrub.
20 feet.
Yeah.
They're 30 feet shrub.
Wow. Agriculture 101.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Straight out of the Bible.
Yeah.
Okay. But when you look at this, and again, like I was talking about, your faith, when you get saved, God implants into you like a grain of mustard seed. It is very tiny. But from that little tiny thing, he says it can grow into, like a mustard tree. And that's our responsibility.
We cultivate it.
Yes.
Take
Feed
care
it.
of it. Yeah.
And this is the faith that sustains us in day to day, helping us to grow, because life is under pressure. But that's what salvation is about. And if we neglect it, and it's not growing, it just stops. And so we aren't able, to finally get there. So, how many of y'all know a guy by the name of Warren Wiersbe?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah, he died here recently, if I remember right. But anyway, let me give you something that I brought my book because I wanted to read this line for line. It says Dr. Warren Wiersbe tells about a man with a hearing problem in Leeds, England, okay, because he was from over there. He said, who went to the doctor. He already had a hearing aid. When the doctor removed the aid, his hearing immediately improved. He had been wearing it in the wrong ear for 20 years.
Oh,
Really?
Man,
That sounded right.
That would be bad.
that will be really bad, yeah.
So, he goes on and he says, one pastor was asked if he had a deaf ministry in his church. And he replied, sometimes I think the whole church is deaf. And sometimes,
Who are you looking at us for?
huh?
Well, just saying.
Whatever shoe fits, wear it.
The whole,
All right, Chet.
okay.
I ain't saying nothing.
That was a good one.
Because here's why I brought this, because when we started talking about coming from the book of Hebrews and stuff, a lot of times what we do is we listen, but we don't hear, and there's a difference. Okay. And the book of Hebrews isn't a book for listening to. It's for hearing. Hearing means it's digging in. It's taking root. And when he starts talking about, you neglect such a great salvation, he's not saying listen. He's saying to hear this. Hear what you got. Hear what it is that I gave to you. It wasn't something to just take, you can listen to music and it'll pass away. But when you start really hearing the music, it starts taking root. It starts, almost like infiltrating your whole being. And that's what the book of Hebrews is all about. Because these people were coming from a point of here's what they were taught as Jewish people growing up. So what happens is when they became a Christian, they wanted them to still maintain part of their old life. They wanted to put them back over some of the laws and some of the rules. And what the writer was saying was, hold on, I need you to hear this. I need you to hear that what God has given you. Not a rule, not a law, but He's given you salvation. But it's something that if you neglect it, it's going to pass you by. You're not going to be able to experience the depth of what it means. And unfortunately, there are too many Christians today that have no clue about what salvation is all about. They just take it for granted. I'm saved and I'm going to heaven and that's all I need to know. No, you still got a while to get there. And so in that journey, understand what it is that you have to enjoy. Because it is an enjoyment. I don't know about you, but that's what sustains me every day. That's what keeps me going. That's why I say to y'all that the first and foremost thing that you need to ever do is establish firmly that you are a Christian. Because if you don't, you're going to miss a whole bunch of stuff. Because Satan is going to throw everything in the book at you, making you want to doubt. And that's why he says, I know that I know that I know who I serve. I know that I have that blessed hope. Never, ever fail to tell people why I have that hope. And when you neglect it, we become deaf to what he's saying to us. And sometimes maybe we've got the hearing aid in the wrong ear.
You can even be sure, and things in life come upon you that Satan gets an in, and you can start that drifting. And if you don't let someone guide you back, you can start falling away, even if you know everything in you that you're a Christian.
That is why every one of us needs somebody.
You know what I'm
Oh,
talking
oh, I
about.
know. Yeah.
My situation,
Mhm.
did I ever think in my adult life I would find myself in the place I was in a few years ago when you reached out to
Yep.
me on Facebook?
And you can if you're not careful, you know. And that's why I say to you a lot, guys and gals, and that is this: somewhere along the line, you need an accountability partner. You really do, because there are going to be some times in your life that you're going to hit a spot, and if you're all out there by yourself, you've got a battle to fight, because Satan will put stuff in your mind. But if you've got an accountability partner, and you can open up to them, then they can say, hold on a minute. Let's stop right here. Let's stop and take a deep breath, and let's think about this. What do we know? What's the truth here? You know? And like the devotion, what's the truth? The truth is God has forgiven me of all of my sins. So why do I need to hang on to any one of them? If I'm going to hang on to them, hang on to them all. What's the big deal if you're going to hang on to one of them? Let's just throw the whole bucket in there, because that's what you're guilty of. But yet that guilt's been erased. So if God has forgiven and forgotten, that's good enough for me. You know. Matter of fact, I don't know about y'all. If He ain't bringing it up, that's cool. I'm okay with that. You know, but that just makes me love Him. That just makes Him love me more and more. Okay, let's go. How much time do I have?
Almost.
Okay, almost 7. So I still got a few minutes. Let's go.
What time do you want to be done?
I need to be out there about quarter after, so I got 15. I got 15 minutes. Let's go to verses 5 through 9. Okay.
For unto the angels hath he not put in subjection the world to come, whereof we speak.
In Hebrews chapter 2, verse number 5, 5 through 9.
We doing 6 too?
5, 6, 7, 8, and 9.
But one in a certain place testified, saying, What is this man, that thou art mindful of him, or the Son of Man, that thou visitest him? Thou makest him a little lower than the angels. Thou crownedest him with glory and honor, and didst set him over the works of thine hands. Thou hast put all things in subjection under his feet. For in that he put all in subjection under him, he left nothing that is not put under him. But now we see not yet all things put under him. But we see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that he, by the grace of God, should taste death for every man.
Okay, so when you begin to read these verses, what did they say to you? What are we talking about here?
Jesus is both God and man.
Yeah, it's in there, but that's not what he's talking about here. He's talking about something else.
Basically talking about Christ's work and salvation for us.
Okay, and And when you begin to look at it, he also is trying to help us to understand that when God created man, he gave man dominion. This is where man was ruling. But then what happened? Yeah. They sinned. And so out of that, then comes Jesus. And what Jesus had to do. That he became lower. He said, you made him lower than the angels for a short time. Okay? So what he was saying is that Jesus was here, the angels were here, but for a short period of time, the angels were here and Jesus was here. Now, he came to do what he was asked to do, and now he's no longer lower than the angels. He says now he has got dominion over the angels. Okay? So when we start talking about dominion or rule, what he's doing is he's beginning to understand and bring into first the context of God creating man and giving man rule over what's here on this earth. That was what was originally there. But because of the sin, then Jesus had to now come from a position of power and authority above the angels, now has to come to a point of subjection or lower than them. Okay? But now, because of what he did, it says now everything is subjected to Jesus. Okay? And so when we also understand that man was also created lower than the angels, okay, subjected to them, but God has promised what to us? That we're going to be higher in the angels. At a point in time, we're going to reign. Okay? And so when we begin to start looking at this, then what can we reason from this that he's talking to us about? Huh? Our salvation, yes, but our salvation leading to some future event. Because at some point in time, we're going to reign. We don't now. When we leave this place and we go after here, and he comes into his kingdom, we're reigning. Okay? And so we begin to have this dominion. Go to 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse number 13. First Corinthians 6:3. It's kind of where he alludes to
Meat for the belly and the belly for the meat, but God shall destroy both, it and them. Now the body is not for fornication, but for the Lord.
Are you in 1 Corinthians 6:3?
1 Corinthians 6.
3.
Yeah. What verse did I tell you?
13.
Okay.
That's what I heard.
1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 3.
That was good.
6:3.
6:3. Okay. Know ye not that you shall judge angels, how much more things that pertain to this life?
Yeah. Know you not that what?
We shall judge angels.
Cool.
We're going to judge the angels.
Isn't that cool? They're good. They're going to be subjected to us.
Wow.
Heaven's getting better all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, and sometimes, we don't realize, these things that, that are there. When you go back into verse number 6 of Hebrews chapter 2. Okay. Now, keep your place here at Hebrews chapter 2, verses 6 and 8, and go back and find the book of Psalms chapter 8 and verses 4 through 6. Psalms chapter 8, verses 4 through 6. And while somebody is reading that, the rest of you all look at your scriptures there in Hebrews chapter 2, verses 6 through 8.
Chapter 8.
Verse 4.
What is man that you remember him, the Son of Man that you look after him? You made him little less than God, and crowned him with glory and honor. You made him Lord over the works of your hands. You put everything under his feet, all the sheep and oxen, as well as the animals in the world, the birds of the sky.
So they sound familiar?
Yeah.
Yes, and the fish and sea and
Psalms chapter 8, verses 4 through 6. 4 through 6, no, 4 through 6. Okay. Okay. Psalms chapter 8, verses 4 through 6 will be the same as Hebrews chapter 2, verses 6 through 8.
Gotcha.
Okay? So the writer in the book of Hebrews is going back to and referring back to the Old Testament in the book of Psalms, where this is not something new. He is, again, who's he talking to? He's talking to the Jewish people. They have the manuscripts of the Old Testament. And so what he's doing is he's telling them something that they've already heard, they already know. But he's bringing it back into and reminding them of when they're talking about their salvation. Okay? He's saying, here. This is what you've already heard. You know, who is God? Or who is man that God is mindful of him? We're talking about an infinite God that is mindful of a finite being and cares so much for this finite being that he is going to give this finite being an infinite life. Infinite. Hello, this is Pastor Chuck Cotton from Calvary Baptist Church. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking the time out to either listen to our sermon or to watch it on video. We are grateful that you've actually taken the time and hope and pray that it has been a blessing to you as it was to us as we delivered it to our congregation. We ask if you have any questions whatsoever that you email us at pastorchuck@calvarybaptistmiddletown.org, or you could come in and give us a phone call, if you would please, at area code 513-423-7251. I'd like to take this opportunity to also invite you to come to our church and visit us, if you would please. We actually have small groups on Sunday morning starting at 9:30 with our morning worship. Prior to our morning small groups, we also provide donuts with coffee, milk, orange juice, a time for fellowship, get to know each other, have a good time before we actually break out into our small groups for Sunday. Our worship services are uplifting, they're fast moving, and everything in our service is just a fast pace. But we do take time every once in a while to slow down as we feel the Holy Spirit moving. And we never want to hinder it in any way. We also have on Sunday evening, during the school year, we have Awana. And Awana starts with the Puggles, actually from age 2 all the way up through high school. And during that period of time, we also have a worship service. Both of these start at 6 o'clock and end at 7:30. Our Wednesday night, we have a Bible study, which starts at 7. We generally finish about 8:15. We would love for you to come and visit with us. Don't have to dress up. Just come as you are, because to us, it doesn't matter. You're a child of God, a creation of His, and so to us, you're important to everything that we do. Our motto here is building the kingdom one life at a time, and we hope that we have a chance to visit with you, get to know you as you get to know us. So thank you, and may God bless you.